Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Jerry's Live. As always, I am your host, Amy Gardner Dean. We are back with the episode that disappeared from everybody's view with JL 104. That was back several weeks ago. I guess it was, now almost a month ago, wasn't it? It was 4 episodes, supposed to be 5 episodes back. And I ended up having a dental emergency and was not able to be here to do the show, and then really not able to do any sort of filming for a short while after because I looked like a chipmunk. So we're back. We are still doing it, and we're still calling it Jail 104, and we'll just slip it back in the correct slot of kind of on that list that you guys have access to. So you'll be able to see it. So if you wondered where that colored pencil episode was, well, it's here. It's now. It's today. It is Colored Pencil How-To, dealing with tricky. I knew this was like going to be one of those problems. Tricky. Subject matters. In colored pencil, you'll get smooth objects like glass. You'll get something that looks papery. You'll get wood grain. You'll get all sorts of different things that might be easier typically with paint instead, but it's colored pencils, so you got to try it with that. So what I decided to do with these episodes, since it seems like everybody's really interested in colored pencil, we're going to break it down and do a little bit longer demo, break each of these into 2 different subject matter textures with each of these episodes, and then as the year progresses, we'll add 2 each time that we do a colored pencil episode. It seems like kind of maybe the way to do that. So that's what we've got on tap today. If you guys saw the episode last week, sadly we were only filming it on Facebook, but it's going to be loaded to YouTube for you guys to see. That was JL 108. That was actually done on site at Pocosin Arts Fine School of Craft. Beautiful location, absolutely gorgeous little town right on the riverfront of the Scuppernong River. Facilities were stunning. I don't know if any of the 3 of you guys saw it. Probably not, because you had the day off from the show. But it was just an amazing week. I had a workshop down there. The 2 viewers that were students were so much fun. We really had a great time bonding. We even snuck off to the beach one day, but that was only because we were going down at 7:30 and 8 in the morning and working till well after midnight most nights, even though the workshop was only an 8-hour workshop with like a 1.5-hour lunch in between. So these ladies came serious, ready to work, and knocked out some exciting stuff. So if you didn't catch that episode, you can go back on Facebook. It's GL 108, and they're going to be making sure that's on YouTube tomorrow. So learn a little bit about Pocosin. It's pocosinarts.org. Beautiful little place that has all sorts of cool workshops and things. So that was last week. This week, if you want to see any of these items that we are showing, you're going to go to the search box on jerrysartorama.com. You're going to type in JL104. It's going to pull up that list of supplies that we've got. We are using the Cezanne Superior Artist Colored Pencils because it's a great value starter set for somebody who's looking to jump into colored pencils but isn't sure maybe how serious they're going to be, because it's got 72 colors, which anytime you are looking to start a medium that's like this where it's not paint, where you can mix the colors easily, it's better to start with a full set of colors just to make life easier for you when you're working. This has the set of 72. Great also for mixed media. So it's a good starter set without investing in several $100s worth of colored pencils, only to find out maybe it's not your bag, maybe you like it, but it's not what your material of preference is going to be. So we're using that to show what you can actually do with a actually really good little set of quality colored pencils. So we are going to start with this. We've got a wood grain subject, and then we're going to be doing an onion, because onions have smooth, shiny areas. They've got papery areas. They have those little kind of dried root ball things on the bottom. So it's going to give you a number of different kind of surfaces and how you're going to layer color to achieve that. Now, I'm going to say, in having done colored pencil and looking at kind of each of these subjects, things I've noticed that are good tips for any colored pencil artist or, you know, wannabe colored pencil artist. Everybody wants to rush, rush, rush. This is the medium where you slow down. The faster you work, the less you may be able to fill your paper evenly, and the more times you're going to have to go over something. So really going slow and methodical, paying attention, is where, if you know you're one of those kind of squirrel kind of artists, maybe this isn't for you unless you can, you know, maybe get some practices, put on the headphones, slow it down, really relax, and layer. I was reading a quote from somebody who is in the Colored Pencil Society of America, and they were saying that they've worked on pieces before over 8 hours without anything to eat or drink or even getting up to go to the bathroom, just in the needing to really work and really push hard. So it's not a short attention span theater medium. The whites of reflections like eyes or water or things like that can be added as several layers before you start working. That was something that I found interesting that I hadn't really thought about, and I guess I always leave the paper blank there to reserve it, but it's better, a lot of artists say, to put it on first so that you don't forget, and then you don't either have to scratch it out and remove too much potentially color if you did not have enough layers, or, you know, possibly damage the paper trying to erase color that does not want to budge. Gel pens, paint pens, or watercolor or design acrylic gouache, either of those where you've got an opaque, you know, drier medium to work with, can also be used to paint highlights back in, as opposed to damaging your paper with erasers or being overly enthusiastic with an X-Acto knife. Don't ask me how I know that. Actually, I don't, but I've seen somebody else do it, and it scared me enough where I never used an X-Acto knife. So, then wax bloom. Turns out you can actually wipe it off very carefully with a soft cloth or a paper towel. Sometimes it picks up a little bit of surface pigment, but it's not going to damage that work. I looked at a demo that somebody did where they did that, and it actually came off really nice. So if you've got those wax layers where it's kind of where you've applied heavier pressure and you've got these little layers of sheen kind of going at different angles, you can actually wipe that off. Now, something that I have in the past with a lot of heavy layers of colored pencil had problem with was losing the tooth of your paper. Whether you're using something smooth, we're going to use Stonehenge for one, then we're also going to use a Canson Mytines for another. You can sometimes lose those adhesions between layers because you've used a lot of fill with your pencil. You can actually use workable fixative or even retouch varnish. I would suggest workable fixative because retouch can be applied too heavy, and that can cause some issues with your work. But you can cement on layers with that retouch. It gives, workable fixative. It gives a little bit of a grainy tooth back to your work, where then you can start layering pencils again. I would suggest testing it with a smaller paper that you've kind of added some colors to, and be able to see, kind of work with it a couple times. See what point you can keep adding with the workable fixative. Always test on something that's a sample, not on your actual artwork. Another good tip, and we realized this actually at the mixed media workshop, and I started thinking about it with colored pencils and did a little bit of research, and there are people that use this too. Low tack masking tape or artist tape you can actually use to push on areas that you want color lifted, as opposed to damaging the paper with erasing, with rubbing, and just push it down and pull, and it will lift areas of color. We did that with gilding because we were down at the waterfront in a very humid environment, and some of the sealants that we used for our wood panels took a lot longer to dry, and when we were gilding, even though it was dry to the touch, the tack kind of stuck the gilding down over the area that was actually, the adhesive was put on. So we tried that with the tape, popped it up perfectly. Thank you, Linda Starr. She is like the crazy try everything student that was fun to have. So, all right. So all these things added on, just tips to know ahead of time, in case you got to run off somewhere. Now you know. I feel like there should be a rainbow. The more you know. So let's go ahead and get set up and get started. Now, we will do the wood grain first. Now, in deciding kind of what you are going to do with your work, I've got this nice wood grain here. There was a darker one I really liked, but I was afraid it wouldn't show up very well on camera. So if you can hit the, yeah, there we go. This is a nice kind of lighter, kind of grayed natural, wood grain that will show up really well on white paper because it's got kind of a light background. There were some that were darker. It would still work with something like a lighter toned paper like this of the My Teens. If you wanted something textural, that would actually work really nice, and you could put some of the, lighter areas with whites. Something even like this would work really nicely with it because it's got some of these golder tones. So it's just kind of whatever you want to do. Even this would work nicely with it. You can see those colors in all of that, but the darker you go, the more you're going to have to color back in with those lights. So we're just going to go with this Stonehenge paper, which is kind of a neutral, almost creamy white, I guess, to me, a little bit ivory, with this particular wood grain. And I'm going to fold it in half just so we've got like a half section. We don't need the big full section. Actually pull this out. This is our Stonehenge white paper that we're going to be using from Legion. Then the next thing you want to do is you really want to look at this and look at your colors and decide. A lot of people don't, and you can work two different ways. I prefer looking at all the colors that I might need and pulling them out and having them on the side ready to go, than working along and really making some progress and going, I need this color, I need that color. So it helps to just kind of put your paper up with what you've got, kind of make some decisions on colors that you might need. Let me get my spectacles. Well, I'm gonna need them eventually. I might as well get them out now. So I can just kind of see what colors I think that I'm gonna want to put in there. There's kind of a little bit of a brownish orange we can tag in there. These are more neutral colors, so I don't need all of these. Then, let's see, I'm gonna get some of these grays out. Get black. And I think all of these kind of natural browns, okay? Pop these in here. Here's a nice color that looks very similar to that, and another one, and yeah, those are too yellow. Okay, so I've got my colors that I've decided I would like to use. Leaning bridge is very helpful with colored pencils, especially since it's clear, you can see through it, but so it doesn't mar your view of what you're working on, but it can keep your hand, since you're doing small amounts of fill, up off your paper where the oil in your hand's not going to smear it. Let's put an eraser up here so these don't go rolling off. All right. If you guys have any questions, go ahead and fire away. So, all right. So I kind of have these just in the order of which I would be able to find them lighter to darker easily. The order doesn't so much matter, it's just that you've got it there. All right, does that look pretty good in the picture frame? I want them to be able to see the wood, but also...
Yeah, that's perfect.
Okay. All right, so we're gonna get going on this. I would draw, I've done it very lightly here, which is light enough where you can barely see it, with one of these kind of a little bit of a yellowish color, a very neutral color. I drew a very light background drawing on there. Now, I've heard artists really recommend that you draw it in graphite and then kind of do your colored pencil, because you can erase the graphite first. Colored pencil, when you go to really erase it, sometimes it can pick the paper up, but to me, I inevitably will forget and leave some graphite somewhere, and graphite will really smear with colored pencil. So I prefer just to pick a color to do it with that's neutral. Yes?
You also have to be careful that if you're heavy-handed, that the graphite pencil isn't too sharp a point, because otherwise you'll leave indentations in the paper that your colored pencil can catch and ruin your
You always
texture.
under drawings, you always want to make way lighter than you feel like you draw, regardless. Just whether you're even light-handed, you just want enough of enough marks on there where you're kind of sure where things are going, and that's all. Okay, it's just an underdrawing for something like this or pastel or something like that is visual notes, if you will. It's not actually the entire drawing. It's just enough kind of little notations where you know where the things are, and then the drawing occurs as you start filling it in. Okay, so the first thing that you'd want to do after you get that on there is you want to block in the undercolor. The highest lights I always say to do first, just to reserve them, if you're using a toned paper, which we're not, because then you would know where all those highlights are going to be. With this, I can kind of tell enough of where I'll be able to see it and kind of just leave it. So the next thing I would want to do is go with some midtones. So we've got some midtones that are grays. We've got some kind of almost like umbery browns, some burnt sienna kind of colors, some ochre colors. So I'm first going to go, since my underdrawing's in kind of this ochre, I'm going to go with that first. And just, and I don't have this one taped down. At home, I would tape it down and move the board, but that starts becoming a whole lot of jumping around for the camera and kind of stressing it out. So I don't want you guys to Blair Witch Project your colored pencil with viewing. So we're not gonna worry about that. I'm gonna put this over here so I can see it better. I just want to make sure we're gonna focus on this board here. Okay.
Is there a right or a wrong way to hold a colored pencil?
It's whatever way in coloring it's going to be comfortable for you, but fill the paper most evenly. With me, it depends on the amount of pressure. Holding it like this is going to be less pressure than if I hold it up like this and really push, right? So if you're doing less pressure, you want it to actually be kind of lighter and either on the side or, at a little bit of an angle where it's leaving the color but not so much of an impression, right? Because all I want to do right now is just kind of ghost in some of this color that I've got up here. I don't want to overwhelm it. And with my camera, I can barely see the color, but it's very strong here. I don't know. Can you guys see the color on the monitors, Katie? Because I know my monitor tends to be a little... Okay. Well, that's
the nature of that color, though.
Yes.
I think I can zoom in a little bit without losing everything.
I'm going to go back and push a little harder in some places once I've got enough of a drawing on where I feel like I'm getting my colors in, okay? All right, so that's very kind of light there. I'm going to come over here. This has a little bit of a bend that comes down, so I want a little bit of this color to kind of trail down. Katie, can you watch the clock for me and kind of let me know at maybe 5-minute intervals with this so we can try to stay on track and make sure we've got time to work on the onion as well?
10 till 6 right now, so I'll give you a few minutes.
Okay.
Morning.
And I'm going a little bit faster than I would at home because this paper actually has a little less texture than I'm used to. So I don't feel like the slower fill is as necessary with this type of paper that's for printmaking. It's warm in here, isn't it? Whew. Warm and muggy North Carolina. Now this pencil already had kind of an angle built into it from me working. I've noticed that when I work with pencils on the side, so the angle's already on there if it's color I use a lot or that I've been using recently. If I was going to just pick this up and it's a brand new set that's factory sharpened, I would probably take just some scrap paper and rub it down to the side so that it's not a really straight hard point, because that applies to the paper very differently. If that makes any sense.
Okay, Amy, once you're done with that yellow, will you try to hold it up to the camera? So
Yes,
you
that's
maybe get
actually
another
what I
color?
was gonna do, so maybe they could see.
Do you always work light to dark when you do colored pencil drawings?
With the white paper, I would, because I don't want it to get too dark too fast. If it's a mid-tone paper, sorry, Amanda has been away at camp, and in dealing with small children, she's a little hoarse from constantly saying, and now we're going to do this. So you might not be able to hear her. She asked if I always work light to dark. With a mid-tone ground paper, like if I was doing something like this, I don't have to work. I would get my lightest lights and I would get my darkest darks immediately, because that's a mid-range value where the white is really bright, right? So I don't want to suddenly be working in darks, because I might make something way darker right away than I want to. So I'm going to work kind of in the lighter values and slowly kind of work my way down. It's a good question.
One of our viewers, Elaine Burnett, says that she sometimes finds it helpful to take her glasses off to blur the colors of the subject when selecting the colors that she uses. Is that a technique that you have ever employed?
I squint.
You squint?
Yeah. Because I don't,
Same thing.
because I've got contacts. Well, I've got contacts, so I can't. If this is up high like this with reading glasses, yes, but same thing. You're just changing your vision to check value instead of, like, you're checking the color value. You're not checking so much the color itself, right? Okay. Right, hold on, let me come down here and then we'll show the camera the okay. Still, it's not focusing in on it because it's so light. Let's see if that works. Can you guys see it now? With the,
Yeah.
okay. Still kind of
Once I
light.
let it-
All right,
yeah.
that's fine.
Still light, but it's
Yes.
the nature of that color. So.
Right. Okay. So that's kind of that first light. So the next thing I'm going to do, now that I've got just some color on so I can see where my drawing is, right, I'm going to get kind of one of the little bit darker browns and go ahead and kind of ghost in where my darkest darks are in the drawing, okay? Anywhere where there's a super dark like the knot, I'm going to go ahead and put that in, and I'm going to put it in as dark as it actually is. I have to pick this up so I can see it at the angle. Can you guys see that? Yeah, that like looks like it's really bright, doesn't it? Now I'm using different pressure where I know that I want something to be very dark. I'm just going ahead and pushing down with it to get some color worked into that paper well. Where I want it to be lighter, I'm just very lightly applying pressure. Okay. Putting a couple of these deeper. Now you want to make sure if you're making harder lines, you want that pencil to be sharp. This has a very sharp edge on one side, and then I've worked it down on the other side. I've got a nail here. I'm going to go ahead and outline. Actually, it looks like a little staple. Now I didn't draw the staple on there. I just put a light line in the yellow where I could see it. But doing that all of a sudden makes that pop out. There's another staple over here. And we'll put photos of these, like up close photos of these in the Jerry's Live group. If you're not a member of the Jerry's Live group, it's a great free Facebook group that's private for just Jerry's viewers. You will have to answer a question for it so that we know you are not a robot. But people post all sorts of artwork in there. People are very supportive. It's a great little community. And when we do stuff like this where we want like more detailed photos for something like this, because if you're watching it at Facebook, it's not the highest resolution like it is for YouTube. It's what, 4K for YouTube, but it's not for Facebook. So so we'll put the photos in usually the next day if we've got the photos for it. It just depends.
Whenever you finish it.
It's late when we get here or leave here. So so we'll have photos in it so you can actually see these up close with a little bit more detail. And I'll put the actual photo that we did it from as well, because sometimes people like to give it a try themselves. The reference photo. And this did come from Pixabay. I know we've got a lot of people that always want to know where these came from. All right, so we've got, between the two boards, there's a hard line. So it's darker than this. I'm just going to kind of lightly put it in so I can see it. Now, if you really like a hard, straight line, feel free to use a straight edge. Just put some tissue paper or something under it so it doesn't smear any of your color. Because, again, this paper does not have a lot of tooth compared to something like the My Teens, so it can like pull a little color, so just be wary of that. All right, we've got one more knot in here. That's actually a little bit lighter brown, so I'll come back to that in a second. Okay, not to have the bridge there because that makes your line that was straight knot. And now people always ask with this and pastels, what makes it a colored pencil drawing? What makes it, or pastels too, you know, what's the difference between drawing and painting? Drawing is a drawing where you're not going all the way to the edge necessarily. Painting, especially with pastels, is where it is over that whole work surface that you've got. With colored pencils, to me, it seems like it's kind of a drawing one way or the other, right? Because it's a dry medium that you're not wetting down, but there's arguments for both, and I don't like to dissuade creativity by a name if that's what people are going to get all steamed about. So,
could you use a hatching technique if you wanted to make it darker?
You could if you want to make it darker, and you want. She asked if you could use a hatching technique to make it darker. You could, but the problem is then you've got the lines. So it's just, if you're fine with it looking, you know, more linear, there's nothing wrong with that. There's all sorts of different, you know, methods that you can do it, and that would be perfectly fine, especially if you like that look. With colored pen, I like that more with, I would do that with something like this if this was regular graphite, but I probably would not want to do it in colored pencil because I guess I just don't like the look of that color-wise. Personally, it's it's relevant. It's whatever the artist likes, right? So, all right. So now we're gonna go with something that's a little kind of more orangey to see if we can. Do you guys want me to put that up to the camera so you can see the little bit of difference? Do this so hopefully it'll pick up on the pencil. Okay, can we see the knots going on there and the little staples? We got the staples in here. Right, over there, there's a nail that's waiting to be found because it's not. Okay.
It's 6 o'clock.
Okay, so we need to move with this a little bit. This is not as dark as I hoped it would be, so I think I'm gonna add a little bit to it because it'll darken this yellow. Yes, and don't put your, this is a demo, so my hand is over here keeping it from sliding around, but don't have your hand on the paper. It will absorb your,
Oils.
yes, oils, sweat, everything else. You do not want that to be worked into a cotton paper. You don't want that in any paper, but cotton is so absorbent, and that'll pull that right on in there, and that will not be good. Any other questions while we're trucking along, ladies? Okay. Putting a note to myself here to come back to kind of, there's this little line right here of a color variant. I'm gonna put that on there so I can see that. All right. Put a little bit here and there. Okay, good. You can start seeing it, looks like now on the monitor. Same with this, that was not dark enough, so we're gonna darken that. And as long as you're working along with the grain, even if you make a mistake on this, but your lines are going linear, no one's really going to be able to tell. Because A, no one's seeing that reference photo that you used, unless you're posting it with it. But B, it just reads as grain because it's going up and down, right? So that should not be a problem. All right. So I think that's kind of added a little bit of color to it. So now we need to kind of go in and start with some of these browns. And I'm going to test a couple of these over here just because I'm not sure. That looks like the one we're looking for. How these work on this white paper. This is why it's always good to have that color chart, right? No, that one's out. We're going to go with this. This is kind of a grade brown. It's very much, looks very much like maybe a raw umber. All right, little line to give myself a note for how I want this to come down. This is when I'm going to start turning this and really working it with the grain of the wood, because if I do this on the side and it's linear, I want those lines to follow this, right?
If you blend with a mineral oil or something like that, would you be able to continue layering up like on top of that?
Mineral oil never dries. She's asked if you layer with a mineral oil. You would want to do mineral spirits if you're going to do this. Mineral oil, remember, doesn't oxidize, right? So that's what oil pastels are made from. So if you put that on, A, it's going to soak into your paper and make a wreck. B, it's just going to be there. Your stuff's going to slide all around. Something like mineral spirits or a solvent like turpentine or rubbing alcohol you can even use is going to, we've used the Chelsea lavender with the pastels and it worked, so it will work with colored pencils. But when you do it, you want to be very careful. You don't want to slog it on like watercolors like you would use with pastels. You want to use maybe a ear swab or something, you know, a very small brush, and you want it blotted out, very dry brush, move that color along, because especially with wax, it'll break down that wax and can cause it to disappear really easily if it's too wet. So you definitely want it to be something that dries, A, and something that's still going to break down that wax layer. It's a good, I'm glad they asked that because that could have been an uh-oh.
Mm-hmm.
But it's probably just that they heard mineral spirits but just didn't, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
6:05.
Okay. We'll go a little bit longer with this and then we'll.
What could you use over, like what could you not use over wax pencils? For instance, like if you had done like a background in colored pencil and you wanted to like letter or something over top of it, what would you not suggest using?
Something that's really wet. You would need a dry brush, whatever it is, on, right? Because number one, it's waxy, so it's going to be
Right.
some issues with sticking. Something like maybe acrylic gouache would work, but still, it's really better if you're going to want to do lettering over something to use. I don't know. Test it and see. I mean, it may work just fine, but it's an awful lot of work with colored pencils to then letter over it when you could just use something that's water-based that's quicker, right?
Yeah.
Because remember we talked about colored pencils go very slowly, so you'd be putting a lot of time and effort into something that might disappear if you get it too wet. So, all right. There's a lot of little lines in here that just kind of, they're not scratchy, but just where this wood has kind of split as it's seasoned. So we just want to give enough to give the illusion of that, okay? Come over here. Actually, let's take one of these grays. I'm going to focus right now, since we're getting short on time, just kind of around this knot. Is kind of the area that we'll finish out, okay?
Amy, can you move it over to
Like that?
Yeah, thank you. I'm trying to zoom in a little bit.
Okay. All right. Would it help if I? Okay, no, it won't. I just can't. Here. Is that good?
Yeah.
Okay. And then there's the little knot
I was just
picture.
trying to zoom in a little closer for him. So
That's
we can
fine.
Concentrate on one area.
This one hasn't been worn down, so I'm gonna take it and get a little edge to it. Because the wood's kind of weathered, right, but it's still got those kind of creamy undertones to it. I haven't gone real hard into these lines to give the depressions and stuff yet, because it was more important to get that color on. But see, now I can take this gray and go back over the brown and really start pushing lines in a little bit harder. Get my deeper gray here. See how a little bit more pressure starts making those lines darker. Like that. Let's go back to this brown. It's a little too gray. Can everybody see how that's starting to build up there? Now, if I wanted to take this and really maybe blend some of the colors, I could either use my white and burnish it, or I could do something which I would prefer to do with wax. The Prismacolor colorless blenders. Wipe some of the color that's off this from before. Now if I go on this, see how that all of a sudden makes that a lot darker there? Just blends with, it's all it is the wax medium with no pigment. So it's burnishing that onto the paper. If I use it over here, that'll really pick up and smooth in that color that I added that was gray. Can you guys see the difference with that? There, that red just popped right there.
It's 6:10.
Okay. All right. Is everybody getting the idea though? This where you're gonna, how you're gonna lay it, layer, layer, layer. Now, I will finish the knot and we'll put it in the group by, let's say Friday. Actually, I'll probably just finish that whole board so you can see what it looks like. But see how that right there is looking like the knot? Right, you can see the dimensionality of in here. It's got the red, it's got kind of the twist. This needs a little bit more layering to kind of flatten that out. But it's starting to look like wood. You want me to hold it up? Would that be easier? Or can you, I mean, I guess you can see it pretty well. Okay, see? All right? Okay. Yes, no, maybe, so. All right, so we've got our next piece. Let's take these. We may want some of these. We may not want some of these. All right. So we got a big fat onion. Where's my... And in looking at this onion picture, you could use a really dark color if you wanted. Can you... There we go. Can you pop back out while we're... Okay, you could use the dark color if you wanted. It's got some of that brown in there. A nice kind of more mid-neutral. There's a pumpkin color. There's kind of a yellowed sand, a cream, a lighter cream. There's all sorts of colors that would work well. The darker you go, the more the colors are going to pop out, but the more also you're going to have to use for your pencil. So with this, if this is the color of the onion that I'm doing, I would prefer to save colored pencil money, which means not have to use as many pencils, right? And work with that color that the onion is. Does that make sense? Because then we've got that mid value already there of the onion that's pretty darn close, but we can kind of, you know, use some white around the outside. Always have lots of whites because you go through tons of whites. So you can use the white on the outside to work with that. I'm going to put this over here. All right, and let me, the colors that we used before actually are pretty good with this thing. There's just a couple other colors that I'm going to add to it. There was a method to my madness, apparently. First time for everything, Amanda. Method to my madness.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes.
We're not just running around without a plan.
Yeah, come on, that's fun.
I've had a couple viewers asking about oil pencils.
Mhm.
The first question was, how do you personally feel about oil-based pencils? And the second one is, what would you use to blend them? Is the goal to remove or to melt the grain of the pencil, or?
With oil-based pencils, it's trickier with oil-based. You can use solvents. The wax-based burnishers, actually, I'm going to say in my experience, work. You're not supposed to really use them, and it can give you some maybe technical issues if you're trying to go back over it. A lot of what I've used is just white over it. I used the Derwent Polychromos for years, and that is an oil-based pencil. But the clear, those Prismacolor clear ones do work. And you can use solvents, but it just, you know, if you're layering it in kind of a slow and methodical manner, you don't really need, because you can blend one color to the next, right? The way you work them together. So you don't necessarily have to have a blending stump. Because, okay, with wax pencils, except for a few brands, typically are not really opaque. So that's why it helps to have this to blend the colors, because it kind of pulls them out. But then again, this is transparent, right? So you're just adding more transparent to transparent. The oil ones, it's not that difficult. It's just, and it's not that big of a changeover, because we used Prismacolor in school, and then I went to the Faber-Castell. I didn't, to be quite honest, really notice enough of a difference in layering and stuff to think it was like, oh my gosh, what do I do? Where do I go? You know, if that makes sense. All right, go ahead, and if you've got other questions, I've got the sketch down. I'm just going to go around it with the white so we can kind of see that edge better, since it's almost the same. There. It's the same value, so you'll be able to kind of see where it is that I've got the onion at, if that makes any sense. Now with these little kind of dried up roots on the bottom, what I recommend people do when they do this kind of work, everybody wants to draw them out perfectly, and everybody always ends up making them look like little flat lines with their pencil. Don't draw them, just do enough suggestions. Use that, we've talked in the drawing episode about positive and negative space. Use the colors as your positive and negative space, and only do it with the color. Just add the colors. Don't think of it as a drawing. Don't think of it as you're doing the roots. Just put the colors in the right place where they need to be, and it will pop out on its own accord. I know that seems very cryptic and weird, and like, what the heck does that mean? But just trust me. Put the color only where the color is, and no more, and then it won't look like weird little strange cutouts that are really difficult to work with.
Would you ever use a paper with sizing on it for colored pencils?
You could. I mean, I've tried it on some watercolor paper before, but I like tooth on my paper. I think what I would do if I was going to do that, to have enough tooth to put, because okay, sizing can feel kind of sticky depending on the pencil. If you do it on a sized paper that's sized for water media, it's something about how it lays down. It feels sticky, and I don't feel like you can add as many layers. So what I would personally do if I was going to do that is I would get a good quality clear gesso and paint it over it, because that's going to give it kind of a sanded kind of texture that's going to hold on to, and it's not going to be quite as slippery feeling, if that makes any sense. So, because that can, if it feels slippery, you're going to be really reluctant to, have problems kind of figuring out what, where, and when, how you're going to apply your stuff. Where if it just goes right on. And that was something a couple people said that they do for adding layers too, is sometimes put a clear gesso over it, but it will kind of fog your background, because it's got things in it like silica that kind of are a matting agent. Okay, to see how in doing this, I'm just doing the negative space. You can see where the little roots are starting on that, right? So you would do enough to just get your area in, and then you can work with the darks in there. I'm going to leave that be, but that hopefully lets people see what I'm talking about. Is that making sense to them? Okay. All right.
And it's showing up really good.
Yeah,
Yes.
I figured that would show up pretty well. And this isn't I would still go back over this and make this much, much whiter. But for right now, just for the sake of argument, we've got that on there. Now, then the next thing I would do is I would find something that's lighter like this, like one of these creams that's lighter than the paper. I also, if I'm working with a colored paper, I keep a scrap of paper next to it so I can test colors, because just because it looks like it's going to show up doesn't mean on a tinted ground like those you can't really see, right? You can barely see. They're yellow. So I really need to see if I can find something that's a little bit lighter cream. That is, but that's really yellow and I'm not happy with it. So I think what I'll do is take one of these and I'll put it on and then I'll knock it back a little bit with the white over it. So we just want to, at this point, get some value in here for the center part and down here, and kind of help us with the color to get that shape. Right now this is just, since you can't see it real super well, this is just drawing on the shape for me, so I know where to fill. And I'm working really fast with this. This is only because I have used this brand of paper for going on, gosh, 30 something years. So I know kind of how to fill it with the edge on the side while I'm doing this. I would be going a lot slower if this was not a demo. I'm gonna take this all the way to that edge. Okay, so you can see it. Okay, so that's not so bad. You can kind of see that. So I've got my lighter areas that I'm going to want to have on there, kind of put in with that. Some of this I'm going to burnish, some of it I'm not. An item like this, you can see the highlights are lighter here. It's going to be the same on apples and things like that, and then you're also going to get a darker value, but you're going to get a reflection over there. So you would need to, after you do that tan color, kind of go back and bump that highlight on there. There's a little bit of kind of lighter here, so I'm going to come in. Okay, can you guys see where that just went in? And what that did was that blended with that color, because I'm kind of gently layering it over it to make a lighter color there. I'm using less pressure over here so it doesn't show up quite as much, just to kind of go up into here. Less pressure, just so it bonds enough to layer it on there. Okay, let's see how we kind of got that color. Does that make sense? Over here it's really light, so I'm going to come back over here and all the way to the edge. Go ahead and put that brighter light on there so I don't accidentally come back and cover it. Alright, so that kind of gives that reflection here of our onion, okay? So let's make it come right down to here.
Do we have light fastness ratings for the Cezanne pencils?
No, we do not. It'll be posted on the website once they get
they're
that
finished
done.
testing?
The Colored Pencil Society of America, if you're a member of that, they do testing, and I know that they've gotten a set and that they're going to be testing it. So their members get that part of your membership fees, because that's super crazy expensive to do. Pay for those results. We're not allowed to take them and then release them to the public because they've paid for that, but that's one big perk of membership through them. So, but that's something that I believe that's underway separately. Common sense, guys, though, is going to say if something is going to be a $300 set of pencils, the ability of that to be like the most light fast is usually holds pretty true. Now, I'm going to say that in that knowing that some brands like Derwent do not have great light fastness ratings on some of their pencils, and some of those sets are crazy expensive, aren't they, Katie? Mm-hmm. When we did that colored pencil set. So that doesn't always hold true, but, you know, always use a little bit of common sense. And if you're learning, it's not, and with colored pencils, again, as much of it can be about how you matte and frame something, and there's UV glass and things like that, as it is anything else, because even a brand that has great light fastness ratings, you still have pencils that are fugitive. You still have pencils that don't have like great light fastness in that same set. It's just the nature of the pigments in it and how this medium works and how it, how light affects it. Because it's little thin layers, guys. It's not, paint where it's got resins and things like that help to protect that pigment. So consider that. All right, so we got that. It looks nice and round. I'm happy with that. Let's go and get something here where we can start putting kind of this orange in. I'm holding this up to it and trying to decide.
While you do that, can you talk about A, pencil lengtheners, and B, what sharpeners you prefer for colored pencils?
Okay. Sharpeners for colored pencils, hand sharpeners. I've only ever used one electric sharpener where I was like, holy crap, that's not going to waste all my pencil. Good hand sharpeners with steel blades that are, really not just some no-name pencil, pencil sharpener at the craft store. The Coom brands that we've got, I really like. The, which is this one that I always have problems with? What were these ones, Katie? I don't remember I have it over here because if I need to sharpen something, it sharpens fast. Those brass ones that we've got. I want to say Stillman and Byrne, and I know that's not right. Rupert and blah, blah, blah. Yeah. But just this little Coom one, the little magnesium pencil sharpener, I've had one of these for forever.
Mobius and Rupert.
Yes, Mobius and Rupert, that brass one. The blades on that thing are awesome. Also, though, the Coom magnesium sharpener that's like maybe $3 at the most does the big fat Jerry's oil pencils and then does all your normal colored pencil size barrels. That thing is fabulous, and I've never had to change the blades on the one I've got at home. Some people like to use an X-Acto and all that. I prefer the learning curve of not cutting myself, but it's up to you. Raffinate pencil lengtheners. Real quick, I'll show this. These are easy to use. This is actually the brand that I had long before I started working at Jerry's because I could burn through some colored pencils, folks. I used to buy them by the dozen, colors I used a lot. So these things are a great friend. Now, if you take them, it just pulls back, like there's this little thing on the barrel. You slide that in and then you push it forward and lock it. Obviously this is way too long, but if you have these little tiny stumps, you can go down to next to nothing. I mean, you can go down to, there's an inch and maybe a quarter to a third left on your pencil. That's about all you're going to be able to get out of it. Now, I've heard some people prefer the flat pencils like Prismacolor because they can glue another pencil on it. But you're starting to take like a lot of time away by the time you glue something like that on. You're taking a lot of time away from what you could just be working. I mean, it's just the nature of the beast. So I like these, and I don't really care for any of the brands that have that flat one, to be quite honest. So so anyway, so those are great, and I don't remember what those are cost, but they come in a pack of 2, which is fantastic and really easy to switch out. So. All right, so we're kind of getting late into this. If I was working on this, I would be taking the next step, which would be kind of sticking some kind of orangey red in here. Now this looks really dark, but this can be burnished up lighter. So I'd be starting to kind of find this curve here, okay? I'm using different pressures because I've got a little bit of yellow over that, so I have to use a slightly different pressure there than where it's just the raw paper itself that I can kind of feel. You'll be able to tell as you work along and see as you go. And that here is a good example of what I just noticed of why you don't put your pencil down like cross-hatching. Dense, soft paper like this. This is pretty soft. I can see my lines as I did a very quick with a light color that was almost the same color as the paper. I did a really quick kind of squiggly line. I can see the squiggly line kind of embedded, etched in there. You guys probably can't because it's really up close, but I can see it. So I can see that that's there. The more layers of color I add, the more it's not going to go down in that really deep recess. So that's why you need to, if you're wanting to do cross-hatching and stuff, that usually requires a very sharp pencil to get those lines on there. You may want to stick with that technique and not switch over because you may have problems with the softness of your paper. And something to note, I've got this on a drawing board that does not have grain where the grain is going to pick up through it. Some people make the mistake with a first drawing and have problems getting things really dark with leaving it in the pad. These papers both came out of pads, right? If you leave it in the pad, you've got the softness of the other papers behind it, so it makes it difficult for you to really bear down on it easily and get really dark darks if you choose. And then when you put it on something regular, you're like, oh crap, why can I get it so much darker now? It's because you had it in that pad. So the pad is just, to me, a safe place to keep that paper. You don't want to work on it in the pad with this kind of thing. Even if you travel, keep a drawing board, tape it to the drawing board, have a piece of illustration board or foam core that you can tape over it when you're not working to keep it safe, but don't keep it in that pad because the pad is going to affect how that pencil lays down. Okay, can we see how this is starting to give us that kind of smoother texture with this? Because it's not shiny. This is skin. It's still very fresh skin, but you can see there's a little tear on it there. You can see that it's muted, right? Because it's the actual skin. I know how on an onion the skin's always way more matte, and then you pop that skin off to start cutting the onion, and then it's suddenly really shiny, right? The color is really bright, and it's more kind of that slippery. This is still dry. So although it's dry, there's some areas that are still fresh from being in the ground, so it's going to be a little bit shinier. So with that, you're going to have to really look at the skin on the onion and determine, like up here, what's the oldest? What's, got some fresh under it. If this had half of that skin off, this would be super shiny. You'd have to do a lot of burnishing, a lot of high reflection, and then this is a lot more matte and dull. So depending on the picture, if you run right out and just get a picture of an onion, really inspect it before you kind of decide what you're going to do with it, because you may be dealing with multiple textures. And Katie, technical question for me. I've got a question for you, Katie.
Mm-hmm.
Can I even put some of this into video in the group where I can take something and kind of show them just like a little quick 1-minute blurb to say, okay, so here's where, I made this shinier by pushing down like this.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Can. Awesome. Well, we will do some of that then. Just so they can see what some of these textures are and how I got them, because it's going to be kind of hard not having the video with it. Okay, can everybody see though how that's starting to kind of shape and come across? I'd be bringing this down right to kind of this white here. These little veins can be drawn on and then gone back over and burnished with the color that's under it, like the yellow or that white, to really soften and matte those out. Okay, I could even take workable fixative probably and spray a little bit on it, and it would probably soften it some. Again, something you want to test before you just do, because you don't know what might happen. All right. Well, we kind of, I think we're time-wise. Yeah. So, all right. So hopefully this makes sense. Does anybody have any last questions before we go? Just real quick. Ladies.
Cindy's really
while you're doing
excited that
I'm
you chose an onion because she saved a brown onion skin a week ago to try and draw. So now she's
Nice.
hyped up.
Okay, so I'm going to challenge her that she needs to share that in the group when she draws it so we can all see it. Don't you think, guys?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Now she's gonna regret having having told us. But that would be awesome. And I'll post these pictures in the group, so if people want to try their hand at them, they will be in there. I can I'll try to post them tomorrow when I get in, and then everybody can be working on theirs to post them. That would be kind of fun and awesome. So colored pencil challenge for the colored pencil people. And it'd be really cool if different people do it. Make sure you put what brand of pencil you're using, because it would be really neat to see if there's like totally different nuances and stuff between the brands too, don't you think? Mm-hmm. So, all right. So see, quick little low light, that starts popping out the onion, making it look a little more 3D there on the bottom. Just ghosted in because I didn't want that to be too dark yet, because I'm not sure how much burnishing this is going to take, and it's better to have it a little light now and then add that dark later. Again, building colors. This paper has lots of tooth, so I can be adding and adding and adding. Okay. All right, well, if there are no more questions, we will finish these up and put them in the group next week. Is it the palette knives next week, or is it the a drawing episode? Can you guys check real quick? Sorry, I totally forgot to add that to the end of the notes.
Read is on it.
Watercolor on the fly, keeping a travel sketchbook. With,
Nope, that was Jimmy.
That was last week.
It'll be
Composition
JL 109.
Composition 101, the importance of the thumbnail.
Oh, yes. Okay, good. We talked about that at my workshop. We talked about thumbnail sketches. So our first composition lesson. Come and learn basically A, what makes a good composition, and B, how to play with ideas. There are so many people, and I do see this in groups sometime, and if you don't know any better, it's not your fault. You've never learned, where it'll be this really beautiful work and it's so very vanilla and in the middle and there's too much negative space around it, rather than really getting a really cool dynamic composition. So we're going to talk about composition, we're going to talk about cropping, and we're going to talk about thumbnails, ways to make very quick little 2, 3, 5-minute sketches and do a multitude of them before you actually start in on a work like a painting, to make some really good choices and play a little bit with composition to find something that makes a really incredible piece of art instead of just a nice piece of art. Okay? So that will be next week. So I expect to see some onions and some wood in the group. And again, join the Jerry's Live group if you're not a member. Just Facebook groups, go to that, look for Jerry's Live, pops up, and there you go. So, all right, thanks for tuning in with us, and we will see everyone next week. Take care.